Aphorisms 108 to 120 of the New Organon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Alan Shaw. The New Organon by Francis Bacon. Translated by James Spedding, Robert Leslie Ellis, and Douglas Denon Heath. Aphorisms 108 to 120 of Book 1. Aphorism 108. So much then for the removing of despair and the raising of hope through the dismissal or rectification of the errors of past time. We must now see what else there is to ground hope upon. And this consideration occurs at once, that if many useful discoveries have been made by accident or upon occasion, when men were not seeking for them, but were busy about other things, no one can doubt but that when they apply themselves to seek and make this their business, and that too by method and in order and not by desultory impulses, they will discover far more. For although it may happen once or twice that a man shall stumble on a thing by accident which, when taking great pains to search for it, he could not find, yet upon the whole it unquestionably falls out the other way, and therefore far better things, and more of them, and at shorter intervals, are to be expected from man's reason and industry and direction and fixed application, than from accident and animal instinct and the like, in which inventions have hitherto had their origin. Aphorism 109. Another argument of hope may be drawn from this, that some of the inventions already known are such as before they were discovered it could hardly have entered any man's head to think of. They would have been simply set aside as impossible. For in conjecturing what may be, men set before them the example of what has been, and divine of the new with an imagination preoccupied and colored by the old. Which way of forming opinions is very fallacious, for streams that are drawn from the spring heads of nature do not always run in the old channels. If, for instance, before the invention of ordnance, a man had described the thing by its effects, and said that there was a new invention by means of which the strongest towers and walls could be shaken and thrown down at a great distance, men would doubtless have begun to think over all the ways of multiplying the force of catapults and mechanical engines by weights and wheels and such machinery for ramming and projecting. But the notion of a fiery blast, suddenly and violently expanding and exploding, would hardly have entered into any man's imagination or fancy, being a thing to which nothing immediately analogous had been seen, except perhaps in an earthquake or in lightning, which as magnalia, or marvels of nature, and by man not imitable, would have been immediately rejected. In the same way, if, before the discovery of silk, anyone had said that there was a kind of thread discovered for the purposes of dress and furniture which far surpassed the thread of linen or of wool in fineness and at the same time in strength, and also in beauty and softness, men would have begun immediately to think of some silky kind of vegetable, or of the finer hair of some animal, or of the feathers and down of birds. But a web woven by a tiny worm, and that in such abundance, and renewing itself yearly, they would assuredly never have thought. Nay, if anyone had said anything about a worm, he would no doubt have been laughed at as dreaming of a new kind of cobwebs. So again, if, before the discovery of the magnet, anyone had said that a certain instrument had been invented by means of which the quarters and points of the heavens could be taken and distinguished with exactness, men would have been carried by their imagination to a variety of conjectures concerning the more exquisite construction of astronomical instruments. But that anything could be discovered agreeing so well in its movements with the heavenly bodies, and yet not a heavenly body itself, but simply a substance of metal or stone, would have been judged altogether incredible. Yet these things and others like them lay for so many ages of the world concealed from men, nor was it by philosophy or the rational arts that they were found out at last, but by accident and occasion, being indeed, as I said, altogether different in kind and as remote as possible from anything that was known before, so that no preconceived notion could possibly have led to the discovery of them. There is therefore much ground for hoping that there are still laid up in the womb of nature many secrets of excellent use, having no affinity or parallelism with anything that is now known, but lying entirely out of the beat of the imagination, which have not yet been found out. They too, no doubt, will some time or other, in the course and revolution of many ages, come to light of themselves, just as the others did. Only by the method of which we are now treating, they can be speedily and suddenly and simultaneously presented and anticipated. Aphorism 110. But we have also discoveries to show of another kind, which prove that noble inventions may be lying at our very feet, and yet mankind may step over without seeing them. For however the discovery of gunpowder, of silk, of the magnet, of sugar, of paper, or the like, may seem to depend on certain properties of things themselves and nature, there is at any rate nothing in the art of printing which is not plain and obvious. Nevertheless, for want of observing that although it is more difficult to arrange types of letters than to write letters by the motion of the hand, there is yet this difference between the two, that types, once arranged, serve for innumerable impressions, but letters written with the hand for a single copy only. Or perhaps again for want of observing that ink can be so thickened as to color without running, particularly when the letters face upwards and the impression is made from above. For want, I say, of observing these things, men went for so many ages without this most beautiful discovery, which is of so much service in the propagation of knowledge. But such is the infelicity and unhappy disposition of the human mind in this course of invention, that it first distrusts and then despises itself. First will not believe that any such thing can be found out, and when it is found out, cannot understand how the world should have missed it so long. And this very thing may be justly taken as an argument of hope, namely, that there is a great mass of inventions still remaining which not only by means of operations that are yet to be discovered, but also through the transferring, comparing, and applying of those already known, by the help of that learned experience of which I spoke, may be deduced and brought to light. Aphorism 111. There is another ground of hope that must not be omitted. Let men but think over their infinite expenditure of understanding, time, and means, on matters and pursuits of far less use and value, whereof, if but a small part were directed to sound and solid studies, there is no difficulty that might not be overcome. This I thought good to add, because I plainly confess that a collection of history, natural and experimental, such as I conceive it and as it ought to be, is a great, I may say a royal work, and of much labor and expense. Aphorism 112. Meantime, let no man be alarmed at the multitude of particulars, but let this rather encourage him to hope. For the particular phenomena of art and nature are but a handful to the inventions of the wit, when disjoined and separated from the evidence of things. Moreover, this road has an issue in the open ground, and not far off. The other has no issue at all, but endless entanglement. For men hitherto have made but short stay with experience, but passing her lightly by, have wasted an infinity of time on meditations and glosses of the wit. But if someone were by that could answer our questions and tell us in each case what the fact in nature is, the discovery of all causes and sciences would be but the work of a few years. Aphorism 113. Moreover, I think that men may take some hope from my own example. And this I say not by way of boasting, but because it is useful to say it. If there be any that despond, let them look at me, that being of all men of my time the most busied in affairs of state, and a man of health not very strong, whereby much time is lost, and in this course altogether a pioneer, following in no man's track nor sharing these counsels with anyone, have nevertheless, by resolutely entering on the true road and submitting my mind to things, advanced these matters, as I suppose, some little way. And then let them consider what may be expected, after the way has been thus indicated, from men abounding in leisure, and from association of labors, and from successions of ages. The rather because it is not a way over which only one man can pass at a time, as is the case with that of reasoning, but one in which the labors and industries of men, especially as regards the collecting of experience, may, with the best effect, be first distributed and then combined. For then only will men begin to know their strength, when instead of great numbers doing all the same things, one shall take charge of one thing, and another of another. Aphorism 114. Lastly, even if the breath of hope which blows on us from that new continent were fainter than it is and harder to perceive, yet the trial, if we would not bear a spirit altogether abject, must by all means be made. For there is no comparison between that which we may lose by not trying and by not succeeding, since by not trying we throw away the chance of an immense good, by not succeeding we only incur the loss of a little human labor. But as it is, it appears to me from what has been said, and also from what has been left unsaid, that there is hope enough and to spare, not only to make a bold man try, but also to make a sober-minded and wise man believe. Aphorism 115. Concerning the grounds, then, for putting away despair, which has been one of the most powerful causes of delay and hindrance to the progress of knowledge, I have now spoken. And this also concludes what I had to say touching the signs and causes of the errors, sluggishness, and ignorance which have prevailed, especially since the more subtle causes, which do not fall under popular judgment and observation, must be referred to what has been said on the idols of the human mind. And here likewise should close that part of my instauration which is devoted to pulling down, which part is performed by three refutations. First, by the refutation of the natural human reason left to itself. Secondly, by the refutation of the demonstrations. And thirdly, by the refutation of the theories, or the received systems of philosophy and doctrine. And the refutation of these has been such as alone it could be, that is to say by signs and the evidence of causes, since no other kind of confutation was open to me, differing as I do from the others, both on first principles and on rules of demonstration. It is time, therefore, to proceed to the art itself and rule of interpreting nature. Still, however, there remains something to be premised, for whereas in this first book of aphorisms I propose to prepare men's minds as well for understanding as for receiving what is to follow, now that I have purged and swept and leveled the floor of the mind, it remains that I place the mind in a good position and, as it were, in a favorable aspect toward what I have to lay before it. For in a new matter, it is not only the strong preoccupation of some old opinion that tends to create a prejudice, but also a false preconception or prefiguration of the new thing which is presented. I will endeavor, therefore, to impart sound and true opinions as to the things I propose, although they are to serve only for the time, and by way of interest, so to speak, till the thing itself, which is the principle, be fully known. Aphorism 116. First, then, I must request men not to suppose that after the fashion of ancient Greeks and of certain moderns, as Telesius, Patricius, Severinus, I wish to found a new sect in philosophy. For this is not what I am about, nor do I think that it matters much to the fortunes of men what abstract notions one may entertain concerning nature and the principles of things. And no doubt many old theories of this kind can be revived, and many new ones introduced, just as many theories of the heavens may be supposed which agree well enough with the phenomena and yet differ with each other. But for my part I do not trouble myself with any such speculative and withal unprofitable matters. My purpose, on the contrary, is to try whether I cannot in very fact lay more firmly the foundations, and extend more widely the limits of the power and greatness of man. And although on some special subjects and in an incomplete form I am in possession of results which I take to be far more true and more certain, and withal more fruitful than those now received, and these I have collected into the fifth part of my instauration, yet I have no entire or universal theory to propound, for it does not seem that the time is come for such an attempt. Neither can I hope to live to complete the sixth part of the instauration, which is destined for the philosophy discovered by the legitimate interpretation of nature, but hold it enough if in the intermediate business I bear myself soberly and profitably, sowing in the meantime for future ages the seeds of a purer truth, and performing my part toward the commencement of the great undertaking. Aphorism 117. And as I do not seek to found a school, so neither do I hold out offers or promises of particular works. It may be thought, indeed, that I who make such frequent mention of works and refer everything to that end, should produce some myself by way of earnest. But my course and method, as I have often clearly stated and would wish to state again, is this: not to extract works from works, or experiments from experiments, as an empiric, but from works and experiments to extract causes and axioms, and again from those causes and axioms new works and experiments, as a legitimate interpreter of nature. And although in my tables of discovery, which compose the fourth part of the instauration, and also in the examples of particulars, which I have adduced in the second part, and moreover in my observations on the history, which I have drawn out in the third part, any reader of even moderate sagacity and intelligence will everywhere observe indications and outlines of many noble works. Still, I candidly confess that the natural history which I now have, whether collected from books or from my own investigations, is neither sufficiently copious nor verified with sufficient accuracy to serve the purposes of legitimate interpretation. Accordingly, if there be any one more apt and better prepared for mechanical pursuits, and sagacious in hunting out works by the mere dealing with experiment, let him by all means use his industry to gather from my history and tables many things by the way, and apply them to the production of works, which may serve as interest until the principle be forthcoming. But for myself, aiming as I do at greater things, I condemn all unseasonable and premature tarrying over such things as these, being, as I often say, like Atalanta's balls. For I do not run off like a child after golden apples, but stake all on the victory of art over nature in the race. Nor do I make haste to mow down the moss or the corn and blade, but wait for the harvest in its due season. Aphorism 118. There will be found, no doubt, when ray history and tables of discovery are read, some things in the experiments themselves that are not quite certain, or perhaps that are quite false, which may make a man think that the foundations and principles upon which my discoveries rest are false and doubtful. But this is of no consequence, for such things must needs happen at first. It is only like the occurrence in a written or printed page of a letter or two mistaken or misplaced, which does not much hinder the reader, because such errors are easily corrected by the sense. So likewise may there occur in my natural history many experiments which are mistaken and falsely set down, and yet they will presently by the discovery of causes and axioms be easily expunged and rejected. It is nevertheless true that if the mistakes in natural history and experiments are important, frequent, and continual, they cannot possibly be corrected or amended by any felicity of wit or art. And therefore, if in my natural history, which has been collected and tested with so much diligence, severity, and I may say religious care, there still lurk at intervals certain falsities or errors in the particulars, what is to be said of common natural history, which in comparison with mine is so negligent and inexact? And what of the philosophy and sciences built on such a sand, or rather quicksand? Let no man therefore trouble himself for this. Aphorism 119. There will be met with also in my history and experiments many things which are trivial and commonly known, many which are mean and low, many, lastly, which are too subtle and merely speculative, and that seem to be of no use, which kind of things may possibly avert and alienate men's interest. And first, for those things which seem common, let men bear in mind that hitherto they have been accustomed to do no more than refer and adapt the causes of things which rarely happen to such as happen frequently, while of those which happen frequently they never ask the cause, but take them as they are for granted. And therefore they do not investigate the causes of weight, of the rotation of heavenly bodies, of heat, cold, light, hardness, softness, rarity, density, liquidity, solidity, animation, inanimation, similarity, dissimilarity, organization, and the like, but admitting these as self-evident and obvious, they dispute and decide on other things of less frequent and familiar occurrence. But I, who am well aware that no judgment can be passed on uncommon or remarkable things, much less anything new brought to light, unless the causes of common things, and the causes of those causes, be first duly examined and found out, am of necessity compelled to admit the commonest things into my history. Nay, in my judgment, philosophy has been hindered by nothing more than this, that things of familiar and frequent occurrence do not arrest and detain the thoughts of men, but are received in passing without any inquiry into their causes, insomuch that information concerning things which are not known is not oftener wanted than attention concerning things which are. Aphorism 120. And for things that are mean or even filthy, things which, as Pliny says, must be introduced with an apology, such things, no less than the most splendid and costly, must be admitted into natural history. Nor is natural history polluted thereby, for the sun enters the sewer no less than the palace, yet takes no pollution. And for myself, I am not raising a capital or pyramid to the pride of man, but laying a foundation in the human understanding for a holy temple after the model of the world. That model therefore I follow. For whatever deserves to exist, deserves also to be known, for knowledge is the image of existence, and things mean and splendid exist alike. Moreover, as from certain putrid substances, musk for instance, and civet, the sweetest odors are sometimes generated, so too from mean and sordid instances there sometimes emanates excellent light and information. But enough and more than enough of this, such fastidiousness being merely childish and effeminate. End of Aphorisms 108 to 120 of Book 1. Recording by Alan Shaw.